Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to this CodeX Speaker Series event. My name is Roland Vogel. I'm Executive Director of CodeX, the Stanford Center for Legal Informatics. It's my unique pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker today. Jerry Kaplan is a legend in Silicon Valley. He's mostly known for his early efforts in the tablet computer industry. He's the founding CEO of Go Corporation, which was founded in 1987. And really 20 years before the iPad, Jerry was thinking about a computer that could be used like a tablet of paper with a touch-sensitive screen. So really a trailblazer in that space. Prior to Go, he co-founded Technology, which was one of the first AI companies to commercialize expert systems. And the company went public in 1986. Then in the 90s, he co-founded On Sale, the first internet auction website, which he led as a CEO and which went public in 1997, was later acquired by Egghead Software and Amazon and eBay actually now own Jerry's patents in that space. Jerry's also a prolific author. He wrote 3 books, including the best-selling classic Startup, A Silicon Valley Adventure, which was published in 1995. And based on a course he taught here at Stanford on the history of artificial intelligence, he wrote a book called Humans Need Not Apply, A Guide to Wealth and Work in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. That book was published in 2015 by Yale University Press. His latest book is Artificial Intelligence, What Everyone Needs to Know. And that was released in 2016. He's already working on his new book, which is a history of Silicon Valley. Jerry holds a PhD in computer science from the University of Pennsylvania, where he already in the late 70s specialized in artificial intelligence. His undergrad degree is in history and philosophy from the University of Chicago. In his talk today, Jerry will talk about artificial intelligence and why we should think again. All right, so over to you. All right, join me in welcoming Jerry.
Am I mic'd up okay? Can people hear me? Okay. Terrific. I may have missed this, but did you mention I'm a fellow at CodeX?
Oh, yeah. Jerry's a fellow at CodeX.
Stanford Center for Legal Informatics. Give me a second here. Okay, just to get an idea for the audience, how many of you are law students? Okay. How many of you are not law students? How many have not raised their hand yet? It's a computer science question. Just doing that for completeness. Let me start off with an ad. Some of this material is I'm going to be teaching in my course this spring. For those of you who are interested, CS22A, the social and economic impact of artificial intelligence. We cover a lot of really fascinating topics. It's an easy course. There's no homework. So the ratio of hopefully learning to effort is very high. All you have to do is show up. So today I just wanted to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence because I have a somewhat different view than the general public and certainly, in fact, a lot of the different people who are in the field. So I wanted to give you a somewhat of a sober perspective on what's really going on in this field, which tends to be overhyped. Now, the common wisdom about artificial intelligence is that we're building increasingly intelligent machines. They're going to ultimately surpass human capabilities. It's going to steal our jobs, possibly even escape human control and take over the world. That's the typical public view. Now, I'm going to present the case today that narrative is both misguided and it's counterproductive. I think that a much more appropriate framing, which is really better supported by actual historical and current events, is that artificial intelligence is simply a natural expansion of longstanding efforts to automate tasks. And this dates it back at least to the Industrial Revolution. And then I want to talk a little bit about the consequences of this for the field itself. So let me start by saying, what really is artificial intelligence? Can machines really think? Now, I'm sorry to tell you that after a lifetime of work in this field and a great deal of reflection on the question, my reluctant and disappointing answer is simple: no. Or at least I agree with Alan Turing's conclusion from his 1950 paper, where he proposed the Turing test, which you've probably heard of. He said that, I believe the question, can machines think, to be too meaningless to deserve discussion. At best, I'm going to say, they don't think the way people think, and I believe it's little more than an analogy to say that machines think at all. Machines are not people, and there's simply no persuasive evidence that they're on the path to becoming generally intelligent, sentient beings. And that's despite what we all see in the movies. But you might say, wait a minute, Jerry. Can't they solve all kinds of complex reasoning and perception problems? Sure, they can perform tasks that humans solve using intelligence. But that doesn't mean that the machines are intelligent. It only means that many of the tasks that we thought required general intelligence are in fact subject to solution by other more mechanical means. There's an old joke in AI, which is that once an AI problem is solved, it's no longer AI. Now, I no longer think this is a joke. I want to take a look with you guys at some of the signature accomplishments of artificial intelligence from a slightly different perspective. Now, for decades, many of you were not alive during those decades. The archetypal test of the coming of age of artificial intelligence is whether a machine could ever beat the world's chess champion. Now, for a long time, chess was considered the quintessential demonstration of human intelligence. Surely, people thought, when a computer could beat the world's chess champion, artificial intelligence would have arrived, and oh my God, what are we going to do? Well, it happened in 1997. Those of you who remember, IBM's Deep Blue beat the then world champion Garry Kasparov, and the media was filled with stories lamenting the arrival of super intelligent machines. There was all kinds of hand-wringing over what this was going to mean for the future of mankind. But the truth was, as we sit here today, it meant nothing, other than that you could do a lot of clever programming and use the increasing speed and capability of computers to play chess. A very important economic goal, to free us from the drudgery of having to play chess ourselves, I might add. Now, the techniques that were used had application to similar classes of problems, but it hardly proved to be the coming of the robot apocalypse. So then when that happened, and the world didn't end, people said, sure, okay, computers can play chess. That's a limited, well-defined domain, but they'll never be able to drive a car. And that requires a broad understanding of the real world and the ability to make split-second judgments in chaotic circumstances, and it requires just plain common sense. Well, as you guys know, this bulwark of human supremacy was breached in 2004 with the DARPA Grand Challenge for Autonomous Vehicles. And yet, our self-driving cars do precisely that. They drive cars. They don't build houses. They don't cook meals. They don't make beds. And we speak of autonomous vehicles. But what that means to an engineer like me and what it means to the general public are two different things. The public discourse is really dangerously disconnected from the academic discourse. Now, to an engineer, it means that data from sensors can be synthesized and analyzed to formulate control instructions that are sent to effectors like brakes and steering. That's autonomy. But to the general public, it means that the car is looking around. It's figuring out what it's seeing. And then it's deciding what it's going to do next. Now, these two descriptions are fundamentally different. Now, a friend of mine, Brad Templeton at Singularity University, put this really well, so I will quote him here. Your car will be truly autonomous when you instruct it to take you to the office and it goes to the beach instead. Okay, so computers can play chess and they could drive cars. But then people said, but they could never play Jeopardy. That requires too much world knowledge, understanding metaphors and clever wordplay. Well, thanks again to the ingenious people at IBM, this hurdle has also been cleared. As you probably know, IBM's Watson program beat Ken Jennings, the world's Jeopardy champion in 2011. Now, what is Watson? The reality is it's a collection of facts and figures encoded into cleverly organized modules that can quickly and accurately answer various types of common Jeopardy questions. That's what Watson was at the time. Now, it certainly is a remarkable and very sophisticated knowledge-based retrieval system and an inference system that was honed, at least at that time, to that very particular problem set. Let me look at another contemporary example that might be close to home. Machine translation. Tremendous strides have been made in the field in the past few years, but mainly it's been done by applying statistical and machine learning techniques to very large bodies of what's called concorded texts. That's the same thoughts expressed in two different languages. But let me point out to you, how do people perform this difficult task of translating from one language to another? They learn two or more languages along with their respective cultures and conventions. And then they read some text in one language and they understand what it says and they render the meaning as closely as possible in the other language. Now, machine translation, as successful as it is today, bears almost no relationship to the human translation process. Its success simply means that there's another way to approximate the same results mechanically. Okay, so machines perform an increasingly diverse array of tasks that people perform by applying their native intelligence. Does that mean the machines are smart? Well, let's look for a second at how we might measure supposed machine intelligence. Now, I pulled this slide off the internet because it illustrates some serious misconceptions about intelligence. We can start by looking at how we, humans, measure human intelligence. Now, one common method is the IQ test, which, of course, is what everybody talks about. But I want you to know that even for humans, that is a deeply flawed concept as a measure of intelligence. Look, we love to measure and rank things with numbers. But let's face it, reducing human intelligence to a flat, linear scale is really highly questionable. You know, you say little Sally here did 2 more arithmetic problems than Johnny did in the time allotted. So her IQ is 7 points higher than his. I mean, bull. That's just crazy. Now, this is not to say that some people aren't smarter than others. Only that simple linear numerical measures provide an inappropriate patina of objectivity and precision. Now, the problem is the story gets worse. What psychologists actually say about IQ, as opposed to what the public thinks about IQ, is that it doesn't measure intelligence at all. It's simply what they call developmental competence. And that's why your IQ is calculated as a function of your age. That's what the Q is, the quotient. You divide by your age. You know, so beyond childhood, it's basically meaningless. It doesn't make any sense to give an IQ test to an adult, at least not the kind we give to children. You know, as psychologists are fond of pointing out, there are many different kinds of intelligence. There's social, emotional, analytic, athletic, musical, etc. They think of those all as different competencies that are elements of your intelligence. So what does it mean to say that Mozart and Einstein have the same IQ? I argue that's meaningless. And more to my point today, it's even less meaningful to talk about machines having an IQ. Wow, it only took 1 millisecond to complete the same sums that took Sally and Johnny an hour to do. The machine must be super smart? Of course not. That's just absolute nonsense. And how on earth do you divide by the machine's age? What does that mean to get its IQ? Yet you have philosophers today running around publishing books talking about what are we going to do when machines have an IQ of 1 million? What does that mean? I'm not naming names on video. Oops. You're probably wondering how I'm going to tie this slide into my talk. Good luck. I'll see what I can do. The truth is that intelligence isn't an objective and well-defined and measurable attribute like mass or blood pressure. It's a subjective, culturally influenced concept, more like beauty. Who's more attractive, Angelina Jolie or January Jones? Is the answer the same in Nairobi or Karachi? Can you say that one is 6.5% more attractive than the other? Just because we can find patterns in terabytes of cat pictures, and we can use that information to classify new pictures just as well as people can, it doesn't mean that machines are getting smarter. I'll go one step further and say that to talk about machines being intelligent at all is really misguided. It's just the wrong way to frame this question. So, why is the myth of machine intelligence so widespread, both among the general public and within the field itself? And I believe there are 3 main sources of this myth. The first is the entertainment industry. I hope this is obvious. You know, we have powerful, often malevolent, deceitful robots. They make for excellent protagonists, you know, just as other mythical creatures like zombies and werewolves and vampires do. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, interestingly enough, there's just enough folklore and facts behind all of those different things to make them plausible to uninformed or impressionable people. And that includes the robots. Now, I don't blame the entertainment industry. It's great entertainment. They're not in the business of educating the public. The second source is the popular press. I might say the enemies of the people. I can stick to my script just like he can. The name that cannot be spoken at Stanford. This is on video? Oh, okay. I'm in trouble. The second, let's say I lost my train of thought. Okay. So the second source of misconception is the popular press. Journalists and reporters tend to support this myth of intelligent machines through the way they cover the field. News stories often report on specific demonstrations or announcements like the ones I talked about earlier, with the basic message that computers can now do something that no one thought they would ever be able to do. And what happens is these are typically reported as sudden breakthroughs, ignoring the fact that incremental progress on the particular problem may have been made for many, many years. And this creates the impression that machine intelligence is lurching forward on its own in unpredictable ways, and there's no way to predict when or what they might be capable of next. It sells newspapers. But the third source is, to me, the most disturbing, and that is workers in the field itself. Now, mostly to garner public and professional prestige, not to mention gain funding for their work, artificial intelligence researchers love to dress their work up in gratuitous anthropomorphisms with these flourishes. this is what I call AI theater. They also have a habit of making very extravagant claims for how broadly and quickly their work is likely to have practical impact, or at least they fail to restrain themselves from overhyping the significance of their work. Watson is a good recent example. This is the image IBM used for Watson. There are many, many others, but I'll just use this one. There's really no technical reason during the Jeopardy. How many people saw that Jeopardy episode? Oh my God, it's faded into history. Isn't that shocking?
It's crazy to me. It was amazing.
It was amazing.
Just watch it. And also, his response was really good. He's welcoming.
I'm going to get to it. Oh, maybe I'm not. Go ahead.
When Ken Jennings, if you're not familiar, Ken Jennings won, what, like 3 weeks in a row? Or
3 weeks, a year. It was like a year. Yeah.
And his response, his wager when he lost was, I, for one, welcome our new robot overlords.
Right. Did you know that was a quote from... no, it was from Homer. Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson. I, for one, welcome our robot overlords. That's right, Homer Simpson, one of the great intellectuals of our time. So what they did is they had the system say its responses in a calm, didactic tone of voice. And they put up a head-like graphic swirling to make you think it was thinking about the problems, making you think it had a mind of its own. But the truth is those were incidental adornments to what was really a tremendous technical achievement. It's fascinating to watch that show, to see it happen. More than you may realize, Watson's Jeopardy victory was really something of a magic show. This is the problem with these AI demonstrations. Its main advantage over the human contestants was that it could ring in before they actually had heard the end of the question, when it estimated it had a high likelihood that it was going to have a correct answer, because it was actually transmitted electronically. It wasn't listening. The whole question was transmitted electronically, and while Alex Trebek was reading it, the machine, of course, that's an eternity to the machine, is sitting there figuring out what it thinks the answer is and figuring out its confidence, and then as soon as he finished, boom, it could ring in a millisecond, and no human could beat that. And in fact, I went back and looked at a lot of the research, getting off the topic because I love this. I went back and looked at a lot of the studies and research on this, and it turns out that the main characteristic for a winner in Jeopardy is the ability to ring in quickly after this little light comes on. Now, IBM didn't do the field any favors, in my view, by wrapping Watson into a theatrical suite of anthropomorphic features. It was just playing to the cheap seats. That's you guys in the back there. But it made for great TV and terrific PR for IBM. Now, another example of the way AI researchers tacitly permit the misinterpretation of their accomplishments is right here at Stanford. I'm going to get kicked out for mentioning this, the ImageNet Large-Scale Visual Recognition Challenge. It's a very valuable project, but the way in which it's presented, well, let me talk a little bit about it. It basically is a benchmark for people who have algorithms to figure out whether or not their algorithms are accurately identifying objects in pictures. It's a great project. Professor Fei-Fei Li is in charge of that, and I'm not at all saying this is a bad thing. But the press reports it in a very odd way. As the press reports note, the contestants in that challenge, their accuracy approaches or exceeds that of humans. Now, what the report fails to mention is that people do rather poorly on the classification task because it's limited to 1,000 categories of objects. And they can't keep 1,000 categories of objects straight in their head. The machines don't have any problem with that, but the people do. And that's where this measure that the machines are doing better than they are comes from. Not to say that great progress isn't being made, but again, this is the magic show at work. This is the AI anthropomorphism and hype machine doing its business. Now, there's a long and undistinguished history of false alarms in artificial intelligence, predicting the imminent emergence of intelligent machines. I could do a whole talk, I do a whole talk on the history of this. And you'll be amazed to see the public claims supposedly respectable people have made in the past. And I'm sorry to say, some of them are still making these same claims today. I just wanted to bring one to your attention because it's so old. This was right after the field was started. This is an article in the failing New York Times. Isn't that what it's called now? The effing New York Times, I guess one could say. A credible news source back then. I realize I'm backing up the president's statements about this. Here's an article, this is 1958, based on a system that was put together by Frank Rosenblatt called a perceptron. It's a really wonderful advance. But listen to what he said and what they reported about this. He said, that is the guy who did it, Frank Rosenblatt, said the machine would be the first device to think as the human brain. As to human, okay, that's his first statement. Mr. Rosenblatt said, in principle, it would be possible to build brains that could reproduce themselves on an assembly line and which would be conscious of their existence. This is 1958. He said this. She's looking at me like, what? And they reported this. I took out the name of the reporter. Here we go on. The Navy revealed the embryo of an electronic computer today that it expects will be able to walk, talk, see, write, reproduce itself, and be conscious of its existence. This is the lead-in to an article in 1958 for something that I'll explain. Maybe I should explain a little more what he was doing. It is expected to be finished in about a year at a cost of $100,000. 1959. This was 8. 9 is a year later when it was supposed to be finished. Oh, is there more? Oh, later perceptrons, that was the name of the system, will be able to recognize people and call out their names and instantly translate speech in one language to speech or writing in another language. It was predicted. Now, I highlight that one because that happened. But it wasn't a year later. It was 58. What, 50 years? Something like that. Almost 50 years later. Okay. Now, Frank Rosenblatt, the guy whose work this was, did a very seminal work on the thing he called perceptrons, which you might be interested to know is the foundation of today's neural networks. It was the original formulation of the basic concept of neural networks. Now, this kind of loose talk has led to several cycles of hype and disappointment. And I assure you, it did nothing but set the field back. I don't know if you, how many people here have had some background in AI? Anybody? Okay, great. Well, you know, there was all these different systems, general problem solvers. Sherdlu, Terry Winograd's thesis. Anybody here know Terry? Terry Winograd? Okay, I'm in the law school. I'll stop this. Scripts and frames, expert systems, case-based reasoning. These were all. Okay, without a deep understanding of how these systems work, and with humans as the only available exemplars with which to interpret the results, obviously the temptation for the average person to see machines as growing, increasingly intelligent and human-like is it's irresistible. But they aren't. This mundane truth the mundane truth is that we're simply getting better at engineering more capable and versatile electronic devices. And we're applying them to an expanding array of practical problems. But contrary to public perception, there's no they there at all. Okay, robots that don't have independent goals and desires. A robot designed to wash and fold laundry, it may be plenty sophisticated. It might learn not to put the laundry away while you're sleeping, or it might decide exactly how, or learn how you like your shirts folded. But it isn't going to wake up one day and say, oh my God, what a fool I've been. I really want to play the great concert halls of Vienna. This is not what the enterprise we're engaged in artificial intelligence. The current wave of work in machine learning is a remarkable advance. It has tremendous potential real-world impact. But there's really no evidence that some kind of holy grail of human intelligence. It's a collection of very powerful programmatic and statistical techniques for extracting actionable information out of large bodies of unstructured data. Now, some of those techniques, like convolutional neural networks, which is taught oversubscribed. The course is over here, studying CNNs. They may be biologically inspired, but it's worth noting that airplane design is biologically inspired by birds. And we're not worried about 747s starting to build nests in trees. We're not worried about them regurgitating jet fuel to feed their young. So we shouldn't be worried about these machines. We're overgeneralizing what this stuff is all about. Now, a lot of the value of machine learning comes from the fact that we've never before had access to such large volumes of data in electronic form. And it turns out you can solve an awful lot of very interesting problems with large amounts of data. Machines can analyze quantities of information in ways that people really can't conceive of. And that's true just as the machines can do arithmetic blindingly faster and more accurately than we can. But it doesn't mean they're growing more intelligent, much less that they may be on the verge of taking over the world. So let me summarize this part of my talk. Lots of problems that we think require intelligence to solve actually don't. And that's what we're using the machines to do. And I hope you'll at least consider my alternative way to think about AI, that it's not really a recreation of human intelligence. It's really a continuation of our process of automating tasks that previously required human intelligence and attention. So now, let me talk a little bit about the real challenges facing the field of artificial intelligence. Let me see. Excuse me for a second. I'm going to skip over some technical stuff. So we don't have that in the audience. Let me start with superintelligence. How many of you have heard this term, superintelligence? Great, okay. How many of you read the book, Superintelligence? One person. I had to read all 450 pages because it's my field. I love Nick Bostrom. He's a really smart guy and does a lot of great work, but that's completely, it's not on a solid foundation. I'm on video. Now, one of the recurring themes today is that we may be risking runaway intelligence where the machines might, in effect, outsmart us and run amok. Worse, we might be just a few keystrokes away from some master's student over here in the computer science department inadvertently setting off an uncontrollable explosion of machine intelligence before we have time to put the proper controls in place. Now, this is an idea that is actually being taken seriously among the regulators of the European Union and even to some degree here in the United States. Now, if you see the world this way, the obvious questions are how close are we to this apocalypse and what should we do about it? How are we going to convince them, that's the machines, to play nice with us? What if they outwit us and squash us like bugs? Now, the implication is that perhaps we should put the brakes on AI research or try to contain it in some way while we figure this all out, the way we did with recombinant DNA and stem cells, chemical and biological weapon systems. Those things are real threats. Those things are really dangerous. Perhaps we should fund research projects on how to make good machines emerge before the bad. There's a whole project on good AI. Actually, they're doing some really good work, but the way in which it's perceived by the public is not really accurate. AI poses no comparable threat to recombinant DNA. A sober look at what AI researchers are actually doing, what they're actually accomplishing, provides no support that I can see for this point of view. And indeed, it's distracting us from the important work of what they really should be doing. Instead of worrying about saving the world from the emergence of malevolent silicon-based life forms, we should recognize these challenges for what they really are, and that is engineering problems. You know, we need to develop professional standards and processes that are required to build systems that don't have dangerous or unintended side effects. Now, how many of you know what movie this is from? 2001, right. Thank God. I've discovered my undergraduate and graduate course. Nobody's seen this movie. It's one of the great movies of all time. Stanley Kubrick's 2001. The content is silly, but it's a great film. Highly recommended. Maybe I'll require it for homework in my course. You have to go see it. This is the classic example, for those of you who don't know, of AI run amok. This was the granddaddy of this whole idea that the machines were going to go crazy. And as the HAL 9000, the intelligent talking machine, said on this space mission, this mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it. Okay, well, either the mission's too important or it's not. I need to explain, I guess, for the audience here. The machine goes ahead and kills a bunch of people. Now, if you were designing this program, how hard would it be for you to incorporate the principle that it's not okay to kill people in pursuit of your goal? It's very simple. And this is treated like some unsolvable problem that we're facing. You know, if you're writing a general purpose spaceship management program that's responsible for maintaining people in suspended animation, which is what this was trying to do, when you think of that, you shouldn't kill those people. You know, the programmers on the HAL 9000 project should be fired for incompetence, and the problem would be solved. Machines have long had the ability to kill people, and they do it all the time. You might not know this, but about 10 people a week die in industrial accidents every day in the US, mostly involving machines run amok, rogue machinery. And we already have governmental agencies tasked with managing that particular problem. We don't think of this as a failure to properly socialize our machines. That's an anthropomorphic conceit. Instead, we see it as a design failure and a lack of appropriate engineering safeguards. And that's the right way to think about these AI issues. Now, the real challenge for AI is not to tame the robots, but to figure out how to ensure that the coming wave of increasingly autonomous machines abide by our commonly accepted human social conventions when they're working for or when they're alongside people in the real world, which is what they will be soon. The systems that we're building are increasingly integrated into the human world, but we don't have a good theoretical foundation for how to incorporate fundamental principles of appropriate behavior into our programs. You know, we're too focused on designing the machines and not enough on what we need to do to ensure that they operate smoothly and safely and integrate well into society. In my opinion, we need to add a whole new dimension of research in artificial intelligence, what you might call societal and ethical programming. Now, this goes far beyond the so-called trolley problem. How many of you have heard the trolley problem? It comes up in the law all the time, so I'm hopeful. I won't explain. I'll just move on. See me after my talk. We'll go through it if you don't know what it is. It's not really about who you're going to kill. There's all kinds of social problems. The trolley problem is about deciding who's going to die and who's responsible. People naturally moderate their own goal-seeking behavior to accommodate the interests and rights of others. You know, we need to understand the principles that underlie that behavior because we're going to need to incorporate those into the systems that we build. Because the systems that we build are going to single-mindedly pursue their goal, whatever that might be, and whatever the consequences, unless we have some kind of overarching theory of how they should moderate their behavior for social reasons. Okay, so far I've talked mostly about the theory. How am I doing on time here? We're supposed to go to. I haven't till. Oh my God! I didn't bring my tap shoes.
We'll leave time for questions.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so far I've talked mostly about theory, but here are actually some practical proposals. First, artificial intelligence systems should incorporate an independent model of what's called their intended theater of operations. In other fields, this is known, fields like nuclear engineering, this is known as the Safe Operating Envelope, or SOE. it's supposed to sense whether it's within that envelope or not, inside that boundaries. The actual environment that the systems operate in should be monitored continuously to ensure that the systems don't find themselves outside of those bounds. And those bounds don't have to be just physical. They can be social, they can be economic, they can be sensitive to various environmental characteristics. For instance, maybe delivery robots shouldn't try to navigate crowds if the crowd is over a certain density. That's an example of applying this principle. Now, when the SOE is exceeded, the system should enter into some kind of a safe mode. For instance, an autonomous vehicle, if it can't make sense of its sensor readings, it should gently come to a stop. And most drones today are programmed, if you've ever played with these drones, they're really cool. If they get outside where it knows it's not in communication with your controller, it turns around and it comes back to its original point of origin and lands. That's another example of this same principle. And those are really cool if you haven't had a chance to play with them. Now, if an autonomous weapons system loses communication with its home base, and it can't verify that it's within certain prescribed geographical boundaries in which it's been instructed to operate, obviously it should shut down. These are the kinds of engineering controls we need to put on these very dangerous systems. If your automated stock trading program is causing major stock market disruptions, it should stop. As you may know, this has been a real problem in the flash crash of 2010, when the stock market dropped 1,000 points in a matter of seconds because these programs had no controls on them and they were fighting with each other to trade stocks. Now, third, we need to study seriously human behavior in public or social environments with an eye toward figuring out how to codify programmatically the conventions that they follow. When and how do people spontaneously decide to queue up? How do they walk in crowds? How do they take turns? How do they negotiate who is going to get that parking spot? And when do they give up their seat on the bus? And a very interesting question is, should the rules be different for robots than they are for people? The answer to which is yes, a lot of the time. It's a big project over here in the computer science department. Maybe you've seen the JR, the Jack robot, that wanders around campus. And they're studying just these issues. How does it walk cooperatively the way that people walk and leave proper space with other people? Now, where competence is at issue, we need certification standards. Before we let robotic barbers or masseuses sell services, they may need to pass appropriate professional exams and safety tests, just like we have crash tests for cars. May I mention, maybe we need to have them pass the bar exam before they can practice law, but that's a separate issue. Then there's a question of when and how the machines should be permitted to act as our agents. I think this is going to be one of the very critical questions in the next couple of decades. As I mentioned, should a robot be allowed to stand in line for you? Is that okay? How are the other people in the line going to feel about that? These systems can repark themselves, the autonomous vehicles, you may know. Well, is that okay, to have the car repark itself when those reparking laws in most cities are designed so that you have to actually go out and move your car yourself? Can they bind us to financial commitments, which is already a problem today? Let me give you the example of automated ticket purchasing bots. We talk about standing in line. You don't realize it, but this is happening electronically today. I just tried to get tickets to, I forget what it was, some big concert down. Okay, and they're instantly sold out. Well, those aren't people pressing that button. 90% of those sales are going to robots. Now, if you could see that, there'd be an outcry. Soon you will be able to see that, and there will be an outcry. Now, finally, for situations where all else fails, we need some programmatic notion of basic ethics. What value should a machine put on human or animal life or personal property, compared to the achievement of its own goal or its own preservation, for that matter? It may be acceptable to run over ants on the way to fetch a latte, but it may not be acceptable to us for a machine to run over stray cats. So it needs to have some notion of what the difference is and why that's important. Now, this is counterintuitive. I have given a lecture here on this subject. That needs to include a theory of when it's okay to break the law. Because people are permitted to break the law under a lot of circumstances based on these larger societal issues. But if we just program the machines to obey the law, lots of bad things are going to happen. You know, a dog walking robot shouldn't let its dog maul a child because it's been programmed to obey a keep off the grass sign. You know, we can and we should develop computational approaches to what we think of as moral judgments. Now, none of this matters when computers operate in limited, well-defined domains, but if we want these AI systems to be trusted and utilized, we're going to have to start taking these kinds of issues seriously. There's a lot of work to be done before we're going to permit these AI systems to cohabitate with us, so to speak, to interact with people, and mostly to act on our behalf. That's where the people in the field need to be focusing their attention. There's a tremendous number of legal issues involved as well, which maybe we can talk about a little bit in question and answer. And we're going to have plenty of advance warning for a lot of these systems, so there's plenty of time for us to start talking about this. So let me try to wrap up. I don't want you to think I'm anti-AI. Not at all. Nothing is further from the truth. I think, and I'm not exaggerating, that its impact on the world is going to be similar to the impact of the invention of the wheel. The wheel, as you probably know, revolutionized transportation. Think about all the effects that that had. That's one of the areas that AI is going to revolutionize in the next 20 or 30 years. It's not at all unreasonable to think that the impact is going to exceed that of the invention of the wheel. But we need to think of AI not as some sort of magical discontinuity in the development of intelligent life on Earth, but as a powerful collection of automation tools that have the potential to transform our livelihoods and vastly increase our wealth. Our task is to make the technology work with and for people, and that's an engineering challenge, not some grand existential threat to humanity. Now, we need to stop portraying AI researchers as wizards. We have to stop bamboozling the press and the public with these gee-whiz demos. We have to stop making excuses for why some of the systems may not perform the way we intended. You know, the machines aren't at fault, we are. So I'm supremely confident that our future is very bright. It's going to be more Star Trek than Terminator. But the road to get there is going to be very rocky unless we keep our heads down, particularly the people in the field, to do some solid engineering. You know, there are also a lot of very significant labor and economic policy issues that will need attention as a result of the things that are going to happen, but that's not the responsibility of this crowd so much, and certainly not the responsibility of the engineers. You know, our technology and our economy should serve us, not the other way around. Thank you very much. Okay.
Jerry.
Thanks for coming. So a lot of people have mentioned the universal basic income as a way to support workers who are being displaced by automation. I was just wondering, you know, what you thought about that and what it's going to take to get there.
Sure. Universal basic income. Is it a good idea? Reminds me not of another Homer Simpson quote, if I can pull this out of my head quickly. Gravity. It's not only a good idea, it's the law, that he said. The general problem is this, and this is a different talk. Again, CS 22A, spring quarter. I talk about this a lot. One of the effects of all of this coming wave of automation, it's going to be a force to increase wealth and income inequality, because the people who can afford to develop, buy, and deploy these devices will gain the economic benefits at the cost of mostly of human laborers who will be out of work. So it makes wealth inequality worse, and the second point is it affects the labor markets in some very interesting ways. So the real thing about UBI, the question is, what's the best way for us to put policies in place that reduce wealth and income inequality? And that's one of the major proposals. Now, it's defined differently by different people. It's probably not worth having a detailed discussion about it. I think it's just ethically incumbent on us today to take the policy and regulatory actions that are necessary to level the playing field a little bit and to include more and more people in the up escalator that we're on economically. And unfortunately, unfettered capitalism is not the way to do it. We do not live in a world free of regulation and unfettered capitalism. In fact, those regulations and capitalism, and I speak from very deep personal experience, work to make a small group of people very wealthy. And that's a very bad thing. Bill Gates was recently quoted, I don't know how many people saw this, saying that we should tax robots. Now, in light of the talk that I just gave, I have two comments. One, good for Bill. He's a smart guy, and he understands that we need to do something about this inequality problem. The other side to it, though, is, frankly, I'm on video. That's a bit of an odd idea, perhaps not the best way to characterize it, because it goes back to this anthropomorphism. We don't have robots marching in and taking people's jobs. We're building machines that do tasks. And the first thing we would run into if we tried to tax robots, riffing off your question, if we try to tax robots, the first thing we're going to discover is, what the heck is a robot? There is no definition. Is an automated milking machine a robot? And do we tax it? And so the answer is not to retard progress, economic progress. It's to come up with better ways to ensure that our economic policies are aligned with our social goals. So UBI, great. I'm in favor of it. Who's going to pay for it? The rich people. That's basically what it comes down to. Sorry.
Other questions for Jerry? Anyone? Yeah.
Thank you. I won't pretend to have
I'm
thought.
sorry,
I won't pretend to have thought about this as much as you have, but the distinction between a lot of the talk was spent on distinguishing between what machines can do and the conception of them being intelligent. But a lot of human intelligence is calculation. There's undoubtedly an emotional aspect to it, and that is what machines probably can't do because they don't have the human body and a heart and a nervous system and all of that. And maybe at some point in the future that could be replicated as well. We have tools like CRISPR, and that could come in, and maybe there'll be some element of emotion that could come in. But don't you think it's a bit semantic it's a semantic question to say whether machines are intelligent in the human way or not? Because they have, if we take human intelligence as a bucket of, say, 100 things, they can do, say, 80 things, and the 20% of the emotional things, admittedly, they can't do. But as far as those 80 goes, they do replicate what humans do.
Well, here's the way I would put it. What I've done here, I'm not making a scientific argument. What I'm doing is I'm taking a set of facts, observable facts, and I'm saying that the way in which they're being framed publicly and even in the field is not helpful. We start to come up with ideas like we need to tax robots, which is on video, is not productive. So a different way to look at it is to understand it in the context, the history of our economic efforts to automate things. Now, these are just different ways to look at the same set of facts. If you want to think the machines are getting more intelligent, okay, you can do that. I think you're going to be disappointed. Let me give you an example. Here's my iPhone. This is supposedly a smartphone. Notice the use of the term smart. And it does a lot of pretty remarkable things that we would regard as smart. Today, this happened this morning. I got an email. It was somebody proposing an appointment. I put the appointment on. I clicked on a button in the email. It created an appointment. It stuck it on my calendar. Then it looked up. I was really impressed where that appointment was. It was able to figure that out from the context of the email that it came from. And I know from prior experience, what it will do is it will check traffic and tell me you better get going now if you want to get there. You've seen this. Now, that's remarkable, and it gives it a sense of being intelligent because it covers so many bases. On the other hand, I know perfectly well that there's a set of programs that have been cobbled together to go make that happen, and it's great. The point about my phone is this. I don't think of it as getting smarter when I download a new application. I don't think of it as getting smarter when it's capable of doing some new thing like warning me that I'm going to be late for an appointment. These are just more uses of the technology. So in our route climbing this ladder from here to superintelligence, I don't even think we've taken the first step. I just think it's the wrong way to be thinking about the particular problem. Now, you had a bunch of things in your question. Could we replicate the human body in electronic form? Well, maybe we can. Probably we can at some point. Should we regard that as a thinking, sentient being? I don't think so. In my latest book, which is, I'll plug that as well, Artificial Intelligence, What Everyone Needs to Know, from Oxford University Press, I talk about this a bit about there's this idea that you've got a spiritual idea in the field by real scientists, that they're going to upload their minds into a machine. If you've ever seen shows like Westworld or Humans or any of these, it's this crazy idea that you're going to somehow take your mind and someday if we can just build a good enough machine, we'll ditch the old body and we'll put them into the new body. I call that grandpa in a can. It is what it is. It's reacting the way that you might have if you were still alive 200 years from now. But do we really regard that as some kind of great transition where I've just somehow shed my body in an apocalyptic way, sort of gone off to heaven and been reborn in a new form? I don't think so. You know, if we have all these robots hanging around in 200 years, you know, that incorporate some of your memories or your capabilities, I'm not sure we're going to accord them the same level of rights and respects that we do to your flesh and blood self during your natural lifetime. So there's a lot of issues involved in that. But that's what I would say by way of answer. Yeah, Carl.
Yes, hello there. So I agree with you. We're not going to have general purpose artificial intelligence in our lifetime. It just ain't there, and it's not going to be.
Thank you.
So what to do, right? Maybe we can take a lesson from our friends, the Germans. The Germans kept their manufacturing industry, and we didn't. So what did they do right? They educated their populace to work with the machines. So they are highly automated, and they are highly employed because they are highly trained. So if we want to have the jobs in this country, we'd better get busy on our education system, right?
Right.
Or else.
Yes, I agree, and you may know I wrote a book largely on that topic, Humans Need Not Apply, A Guide to Wealth and Work in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. So let me make a couple of points. In the public discussion that we have on, let's say, manufacturing in the US, we confuse two things. I see there's this confusion. The first point is the jobs have gone away. True enough. But the thing that implies is that manufacturing went away. That's not true. We are manufacturing more stuff today here in the US than we ever have in the past. And the reason that the jobs went away, and the reason we can manufacture more stuff and that there's demand for those things and they're cheaper, is automation. Okay, so what's the problem we're really talking about? It's easy to make these new machines, but we haven't paid attention to the problem of retraining the workforce to have the skills that are actually necessary to the needs of employers in the future. Now, there's some good things happening in this regard, but I would argue, I'm just going to summarize my argument, is that because the government is the lender of first resort for student loans, how many of you guys have student loans to come to college? Well, as you may know, it's very questionable whether, talk about insulting my host, whether the loans that you take out to go to Stanford Law School actually have enough economic value to return to you in the future. I think it does here.
In Slovakia, university education is free. Even right. for the foreigners.
Well, it's not free. It's that the government, somebody else pays. Okay, that's right. Okay, well, my point is that in the education of the general public, we're educating. I have 4 kids. They recently generally graduated college or high school. And they learned the same damn stuff in more or less the same ways that I did 50 years ago. We're still teaching, and it's a big problem, particularly for women advancing in technology. We're still teaching calculus, requiring them to take calculus in high school. How many people have used calculus in the past month? Yes, good for you. Yeah, Carl, you did. Okay, my point is that the curriculums haven't been updated, and because the government is funding this, there is not the economic incentive to ensure that the skills that we are teaching people have economic value in the workplace. So we graduate a lot of people who can't get jobs because they don't have the skills, and we blame them. You should have studied something different. Well, we're not doing the right things. And there are some moves in the right direction on this. I think if I were the president, I know exactly what I would do in this regard. I would identify a set of industries that can be physically distributed, geographically distributed more easily. I would have a commission that would look at what skills are necessary for those industries. And I would set up training centers at a reasonable cost in the places where we have the people. And believe me, the industry will go with it. And we would solve a lot of the kinds of problems that are happening in the labor market today. Anyway, thank you, Carl, but let me take a few more questions if I can. Yes, you got a mic? You brought your own?
Pardon?
You brought your own mic.
2 things. One is there has been, and I'd like you to comment if you could on both. There was an article recently, I believe, in the Wall Street Journal about building robots in the United States.
Yes.
The robots we use mostly in this country, or for production lines, et cetera, are either German or Japanese or their back end, whoever builds it for them. Sure. The Tesla plant over here uses Yaskawa robots, uses some German robots. Yes. If we had corporations, let's say Lockheed Martin's building the F-35, and they are allowed to do it at the price they're doing it at, but certain parts of that profit, certain percentage by contract, they themselves open up a production line or a line to teach people how to build robots and what that entails in all the different levels.
Yes.
Would that be a way that we could actually integrate that part of the world into us from the beginning to the end?
Whether or not that is a good idea is probably dependent on where you are on the spectrum between being a globalist, which I am, and being a nationalist, which the president is. And if it's cheaper and easier to buy robots from Japan and Germany, I think that's great as long as we have a continued supply of those and that is not subject to disruption. That's an interesting question from a defense standpoint. However, if we insist that we buy American, all we're doing is placing a tax on people so that we can keep other people in jobs for which there is relatively low economic value. And so, I come out very much on one side of that spectrum, but I respect the fact that there are other points of view. We can close the borders. Prices will go up. All kinds of supply chains will be disrupted. It would be a disaster, but people don't know that yet, and it would have to happen before they go, what went wrong? I thought I was going to have a job because, it's the difference between North Korea and South Korea. There it is in a nutshell. You do this over a period of time, that's what happens. They're actually having the same problem in China. It's too closed a society.
I was just looking at it from an educational and skill-based point of view.
Well, look, rather than us prejudging this, what I would do is what I think we should do is set up the right kinds of ways so that there can be a feedback loop from the needs of employers to the skills that are being taught. That's what's missing. We don't need to say what those skills are. We just need to close that feedback loop and make it a little bit tighter than it is today. I believe there are more open jobs in the U.S. today than there are unemployed people in the U.S. And a lot of those jobs are very good jobs. Numerically controlled milling machine operators. That's one I happen to know. I have to read all this stuff. Now, that's a great job. And the machine operators, people used to cut all the stuff by hand according to templates. You know, they're out at McDonald's flipping burgers, and we got these new machines, and they don't have enough people to hire to be able to operate them. Well, that's a training problem. Take those people, train them up, figure out the way to facilitate that.
And directly for your talk, you talked about computational ethics.
Yes.
Is it one set of ethics that gets programmed into the machine, or is it a whole series of a set of ethics based on where you are and what, you know, at what time it is?
Well, there are ethics professors of philosophy at every major university, including here. And that is this whole issue of what is it? There's no, let me state it differently. There's no accepted fundamental theory of ethical behavior. There's a deontological, there's a utilitarian. I mean, they have all these fancy names for these different theories of ethics. But they all generally fall into certain kinds of categories. And for the level of stuff we need to do, I don't care why you think it's better to kill one person than two, but you know, what your theory isn't so important. The guy who's going to program it's going to say, I see 5 people in that corner. I see 2 people on this corner. I can't stop. I got to hit one group. What should I do? It's not that hard. You can have a set of, I kind of alluded to some of this stuff. Human life is important. You know, the preservation of your own self as a robot, if you will, or as a machine, should be deprioritized over most living things, not necessarily all living things. So there's just a set of general principles I think that can be done. So I wouldn't curse the darkness, but we don't have a scientifically accepted notion of ethics, and that's why these professors get tenure and continue to argue with each other all day long at conferences, many of which I have been to. Yeah.
Jerry,
Yeah,
great talk.
Thank you.
My point is an extension of what you just answered, which is, is there a need to teach the ethics or a code of conduct to those who are developing AI?
Yes.
Before we teach it to the machines?
Well, we're using the term teach, but this again is one of these anthropomorphisms. Well, I guess we do have to teach the people. Look, to me, this is just like the people in the civil engineering department here at Stanford having certain standards that bridges have to meet before they are built or deployed. And so, yeah, we can provide a set of standards. We could say, have you specified, this is just me making it up, have you specified your standard operating envelope? What actions have you taken if that's determined to be exceeded? Now, these are just engineering principles and designs. And most of it's just having it in your head and structuring the code in a way that allows you to adjust those without having to rewrite the whole damn system just because you ran over a dog. You know, so I think, yeah, there's definitely standards. I don't think we should shy away from them. And it's very similar to what takes place in biological research. You know, what standards do we have for our laboratories here at Stanford? You know, where we sit today, we're going to be the first ones to go if some of that stuff gets loose. But, you know, it's quite remarkable, some of the things that are happening, and some of it's fairly dangerous. We should stop monkeying with those viruses over there. You done?
Actually, a quick plug for Professor Paul Hewitt's workshop
Okay.
on logic in collaboration, intelligence, and application. So if you're interested in that, grab a flyer here. And I also have a question for Jerry.
Sure.
What do you think about sort of the notion of the robo-lawyer, and in particular, not sort of the notion of like the aspect of automating legal tasks in the TurboTax kind of way, but more the sort of the prediction aspect of the robo-lawyer, and using some big data to predict, you know, the odds of a certain legal outcome. Should lawyers be worried about the robo-lawyer?
I don't think they should worry. Computational law, as you know, I'm a big proponent of these concepts. But here's a different way to look at this. Comes, again, back to this false anthropomorphism. We're not building machines that are going to practice law. We're not building machines that we're going to wheel them in and replace lawyers. We will probably never build machines that are going to go into court and say, Your Honor, my client is not guilty. I mean, that's not what's happening. In terms of technology and automation in the law, what's really happening is that we're identifying tasks which are time-consuming, expensive, or require a lot of human attention or are not done very well by people, like discovery. You guys all know what discovery is. I usually have to explain that for my audiences. But we can automate tasks like that are relatively routine and goal-oriented. We can measure the success of those kinds of programs and use them in order to leverage the time of lawyers so that they can redeploy themselves on more productive issues. Now, this is nothing specific to the law. The same thing goes on in every field. The nature of automation is that it transforms the character of work. And the skills that you need and the things that you focus on change as we automate tasks which are subject to automation. So the first mistake we make is we say, well, are machines going to take our jobs? What's really going on is we're designing systems and machines that perform tasks. If your job consists of 3 tasks, and one of them is automatable, now you can focus on your other 2 tasks, and that machine has made you more productive. When the machine comes in that does your second task, now you're really more productive, and that machine has been a tremendous benefit to you as a practitioner of law. You can charge a higher hourly rate or whatever it is. When you roll in the third machine, all of a sudden it took your job. So you have to think about this at the right level. The machines are not threats to employment. They are means to automate tasks, and that changes the nature of jobs and the nature of employment.
Any other questions?
A few months ago, I believe a luxury car brand said that they would prioritize passengers' lives over bystanders.
Yes, big problem.
And so if you're saying that the engineers are the ones who needs to, or some of the people who need to be educated on ethics, what starts first? Like, does the legal infrastructure need to be put in place about what is the right decision to be made in that circumstance, or is it up to the engineer to decide?
Well, let me start with the end of your question. Historically, we don't get out ahead of this with the law. That's getting out ahead of our skis, so to speak. You wait until problems happen, and then cases are brought, and case law builds up, and then we have a set of standards that are necessary. But in this particular instance, this is one of the first instances that will become practical and we're really going to have to deal with, of something I talked about in my talk. Wrong slide. Is that what do we mean when a machine can act as our agent? When is it okay, and how much should a machine be allowed to act as our agent? If I'm driving, I don't think anybody has a problem with me prioritizing my life over the life of 2 pedestrians. That's something that we accept. I've done reasonable effort to avoid hurting them. If it was not impossible, I have some liability, maybe civil liability, but not I didn't commit murder as such. But we might feel differently when the car is driving itself. Would you buy a car that's going to prioritize 2 pedestrians over your own life and drive you off the edge of a bridge to save 2 people? I think not. But to show you how subtle these kinds of problems are, let me take that exact example. We're still thinking today, well, people are going to buy cars and they're going to own them, and those cars are effectively going to act as their agents. But it's quite possible we'll have public Uber-like services that are not owned by us. And we'd take a very different view if the people in one train car over here at the Caltrain station somehow went to war with some people in the next car over which one of them was going to get hit first in an accident. That's not the way that wasn't very clear, was it? Let me back up. If we had a system of cars that were public utility, we would never want it to prioritize the life of the passenger over the life of other people, because obviously that doesn't fit a utilitarian ethical model. We're going to kill too many people. You want to minimize the number of people who get hurt. So who owns that car? That is to say, who is that car an agent of? Makes a big difference in our ethical intuitions about what kind of behavior is appropriate for that vehicle. And what you said is true. The problem is, you know, are you going to go out and buy a BMW because it's going to prioritize your life better than your Prius? That may be the kind of question we're going to be dealing with in the near future.
All right, on that note, we're pretty much at the end of our time. Please join me in thanking Jerry again for a wonderful talk. All right, thank you all for coming.